I mean, this is a cube style home basically, so it's modern or contemporary. It's got flat roof, and you can see the large windows up in the front there. For scale, those windows are about 8 feet by 6 feet that you see on the left there, and then it's 8 by 2 on the other side. The garage is below it. So this is just the outside of it. That though, we're not going to really focus too much on the house itself, but this is what it looks like. This is a rendering of the front. It's a 3/4 elevation of the house, so roughly it's going to look like that. You can see it's white, and you can see the upper section. Let's see, here's the back. The only thing I'll mention is those little wood trusses are not correct. It's actually going to be a concrete overhang, so there's a 10-foot overhang on the right there that actually kind of gives us a patio area. There's a pool. Should be fun. There's going to be some sound out there, but let's talk about the dedicated media room. So first, let's get into the sound mitigation. So it's a second floor space. It's that area you saw over the garage. The part in the front is the office, and then behind it there's a windowless area. It's actually the media room. It's 15 feet 8 inches wide by 19 feet 4 inches long, and it's got 10-foot ceilings roughly. I haven't actually measured the room now that the drywall's up, so we'll see what it came to. I know that yeah, it's not a huge room, but it's a good size for somebody like me. Yeah. So the outer walls, that means the exterior walls, there's 2 of those in the room, are 2x6, and they use these new, relatively new product called the Hush Frame Rafts. There's 2 layers of drywall on the inside, 2 layers of plywood on the outside, R19 insulation inside, and that gives you an STC of roughly 63, which is really good. Normally you can't get that with a 2x6 wall, so being able to do a 2x6 wall, not really lose much of any floor space at all, and achieve STC 63 is pretty extraordinary. So this is one of the wall designs that I would use with clients. The partition walls, on the other hand, were done a little bit differently. Some of it was cost issues, and some of it actually, because I did give up floor space for this, but some of it was done for other reasons, which is that I wanted to make sure I had a good amount of sound isolation at low frequencies. So even though that wall reaches STC 63, where you will see that walls tend to do more poorly is at the low frequencies. The double stud wall has roughly the same STC rating. It's about an STC 65, but its low frequency isolation is a lot better because the air gap is huge. Instead of being just about 5.5 inches, it's basically 9.5 inches. But the other advantage is I did in-wall subs in the back of the room, very high output in-wall subs, and I needed the extra depth. The floor is decoupled, so it's a floating floor. Don, you were jumping on it. The thing is like a trampoline, right? It's pretty cool. Yeah, and the whole point of this was, A, I wanted a room that was sound mitigated, but also because I wanted to be able to show other folks what I can do. So I'm documenting the process, taking pictures, and then this will be something that I can invite people into so they can see for themselves. I mean, the door that's coming in, the shipping weight of the whole door, including the crate, is 650 pounds. The door itself is 350 pounds. That's the slab. It's a massive door. The wall ratings are all, as I said, basically 63 plus. You've got the floor. So just to give you guys an idea, typical floor is where you've just got drywall on the the bottom part where the ceiling would be, and then on the actual floor part you've got your plywood decking. Maybe you threw some insulation in there. You're looking at like IACs in the 30s, maybe 20s even in some of the worst ones. STC rating is probably going to be high 30s, maybe low 40s. This one is going to have an IAC of around 56. The STC is going to be closer to 60, so that's actually really exceptional, and that's basically due to the floating floor. It's actually, the performance on this in the lab tests that were done is so good that it competes with doing a 2-inch to 3-inch slab, a floating slab, which is often, it's actually what I wanted to go with, but it was $5,000 just for the slab alone. And this performs just as well, so that's really nice because this was not $5,000. And then the ceiling uses the Hush Frame Rafts, 2 layers of drywall, R38 insulation. I have no idea what the STC is. It's not something that was ever tested, but it would be at least STC 63 because the air gap, it's basically the same as the 2x6 wall with a much bigger air gap. It is, yes. Isolated it in a way that provides good isolation to the neighbors. It makes the room quieter. It means I'm not going to annoy them as much, but then it also provides as much or better insulation to the rest of the house. About 85–90% of the room actually sits over the garage, so a portion of it does sit over one of the bedrooms, but it's, with all of the isolation that I've done, it really should be pretty good. So the double layers of drywall that were done definitely makes the walls more solid, but because they're on decoupling clips on all these outside walls, you are getting the benefit of some give to it. So I actually didn't, and a lot of people are probably going to wonder why, but I was going to do that, and then I started to do a lot of research on basically what kind of STC performance you get from different walls. And the walls that I wanted to build had never been tested by green glue, I thought. So I started sending emails out to some of the labs that do the testing to find out if they actually had. Because I had emailed the company, St. Gobain, they basically didn't give me an answer. So I thought, okay, so let me talk to some other companies and find out. And one of the labs basically said, oh yeah, they did test it. There's a reason why you can't find it. I said, why? They said, because it didn't perform any better than no green glue at all. So basically what I found out was once the wall, it does work. I don't want people to walk away and say I'm suggesting it doesn't work. It does. It doesn't work quite as well as they suggest it does, including when you get to a certain point, it just doesn't matter anymore. Basically, part of how it works is it helps to decouple the two layers of drywall. It creates a constrained layer damping as well, which has got some benefit to it. But if the wall is already relatively well decoupled and has a lot of mass in it, it's just not going to add any benefit. So in the case of these double stud walls like I did here, you might gain an STC point, probably not. In the case of those decoupled walls, you'll get nothing. It actually was tested, it didn't provide any benefit at all. So I decided not to waste the money on it. I mean, not only does the material have a cost to it, but the labor as well. And as a lot of people probably know, I'm building in the midst of one of the worst times to build. Material costs have gone through the roof, labor costs are up, and I wanted to keep costs reasonable because I am paying for this, and that would have gotten pretty expensive. So given that it would have offered basically little to no benefit, I decided it wasn't worth it. So it's two layers of drywall, they're right on top of each other. Some of the things that I've advocated in the past, I've mentioned to Eugene as well about how the constrained layer damping should provide less stiffness, things like that. It turns out that's not true. Once the screws go through it, yeah, I thought it was, and it made sense. I talked to somebody though who had done a lot of extensive testing on this. It was Ron Saros at NWA Labs, and he basically said, yeah, I mean, that may be true in theory, but it didn't hold up. Once we put it in the lab, it really didn't do that. So I decided that, you know, being realistic about it, it just didn't make sense. So anyway, here's details of the room. You can see all those little wooden blocks everywhere. You can see them on the floor, and you can see them on the wall in that right picture. Those are the hush frame decouplers. You can see the leftmost one, that's the double stud wall, pretty sizable air gap. That's what gives me the 9.5 inches. And then you can also see the insulation on the floor. That actually was double the thickness. Half of that gets pulled up and then was laid out in other sections, so it's not really that thick. 2 layers of plywood were put down, and that's the decking layer that Don and I were jumping around on that basically floats. Those, you could see it in the other picture, but those hush frames actually have like a silicone layer that acts like a damp spring, and it works really well. It was actually impressive. They cost something like, I think in bulk, you know, once you're buying for like a house, maybe $250 a piece, something like that. So the cost of it isn't all that great because they're done 24 inches on center for the floor, 16 inches on center for the stud walls, but then 24 inches up in height. So you don't actually, I mean, it's at most a couple $1,000 basically in isolators. And when I talked to the guy that was doing all of the work for me, he said, you know, I hear what they're saying about you know, you can't screw through those, through the top of them, because you could end up shorting them out by having the screw go all the way through the spring part into the bottom layer. He goes, the problem is it's got to be adhered in some way. So I said, all right, why don't we glue it? He goes, well, it's got to be clamped. So what we did was we actually bought short wood screws that we knew couldn't possibly go all the way through, and that's what they did for the floor. So it is screwed in. They screwed the bottom plate into the floor itself, into the decking, and then they put those 2 layers of decking on top. They screwed those in as well, but the screws are so short that they can't go through the spring. So it's got glue on it. It's got screws in it. So basically it's pretty solid. It shouldn't squeak. Nothing should vibrate. I mean, the idea of a floating floor is nothing novel. It's just that normally they cost a lot more money and you don't see them in houses like this. Now, the one thing I will say for people who are curious is that because the subwoofers are going to sit on top of that, the whole floor is going to shake. Like, it's actually going to be kind of a cool thing. You're going to get a lot of tactile effect from it. All right, so then here's some more details. So rightmost picture, people probably recognize that. Those are putty pads. Those are usually they're used for fireproofing, and it keeps the fire from being able to get into the box. But it also provides sound mitigation. What you do is you wrap the putty pad around it. That one wasn't done yet. I was in the process of doing it. Just took a picture. But basically you want to wrap it around primarily the back and sides where the air would come in, and then you wrap it around the wire itself at the top and bottom, and it provides an air seal and some mass against sound getting through. There's no denying that my builder was a bit that way, but he is a custom builder, so I was able to do more. So here's a detailed picture of the decoupled subwoofer mount. Basically I used hush frames and isolated L brackets. This is my own thing. I came up with this to mount the sub. Actually looking at putting this together as a kit that they could offer with the sub potentially for a mount. So for those of you who are wondering why I did this, there's also hush frames that are sitting under it. So it sits on top of basically springs. There's 4 springs under it, and then there's these 4 spring mounts on top. And the reason for that is, had I not done this, had I done what Don said and screwed it directly into the stud wall, which is how it was designed. Well, no, yes. Had I done what RBH had told me to do and what most subwoofers do, it would have transmitted low frequency energy directly into the floor. Because those stud walls, they have a little tiny bit of decoupling on the front one, the inner frame one, but the rear one isn't decoupled. It's actually structural in this one case. And so I would have been transmitting all that low frequency energy right into the house. It would have basically undone everything I did. And that would have been pretty sucky. So in order to make sure that I'm not transmitting all this low frequency energy through the house, I had to make sure that the subs themselves were decoupled. So the problem is, if you do like just a weak decoupling, like just a little rubber washer or something, you're not going to get much out of it. You actually need to get a pretty good amount of travel. So this thing can move, I'd say at least half an inch, which allows us to absorb a lot of that shake. Studs, it's still going to transmit all the energy right to the floor. So if you don't decouple it, it's not going to help anything. It doesn't matter where you mount it in the wall. If it's connected to the studs are connected to the floor, which connects to the rest of the house. Yeah, I was impressed. It was just something that made sense. All right, so the great room has a system as well. The great room is basically the living room area, but it's open to the kitchen, so it's officially called a great room. So the left is the inspiration. This is not what mine is going to look like. But we saw that picture, we thought that was really cool. It's black marble, I think it's called Nero marble. And so we're doing something very similar. It is going to have the fireplace, not the 3-sided like that, but it's going to have a fireplace, and then you can see them there, there's speaker brackets, and these are for some DefTech speakers that we're putting in. You can see all the wiring that's going into it. You know, you've got speaker cables running to each one of those speaker brackets, but then you can see a whole bunch of Cat 5 cable hanging in there. And that's because, Don, you had convinced me, and I followed your recommendations, to really wire the house up. I mean, there's got to be at least a mile's worth of wire in that house at this point, given. Yeah. This is the great room, a little bit less naked. I don't have a picture of what it looks like right now. As soon as it gets more cleaned up, I will. So definitely there's that cube theme that we went with, that the shape of the house is carried out throughout. There's a floating ceiling as well there, and then in the bedroom you can see it framed in. So the dedicated media room, just to kind of go through the equipment, for now it's probably going to change. We've been talking a lot about this, but for now at least it's my Gedley Abbey LCRs. The surround speakers are pending. Various companies I've been talking to about that, so there's various options that could go in there. The Atmos is pending. Same thing, we've talked to some companies, still working out exactly what that's going to be. But everything's wired up, we just have to put them in place. The family room has that thing that comes out that the TV's mounted to and the fireplace is on, but it's only about 6 inches deep or so. Maybe it's a little deeper than, maybe 8 inches deep. And in the media room, it'll have to be bigger than that, but we're going to do something very similar. After the whole room is all sealed up and finished, we're going to frame in a couple of things, and one of them is we're going to frame in essentially like a baffle wall, this little area, but instead of being, not that the baffle wall can't be this shallow, but instead of being, let's say, 2 feet deep, it's only going to probably be about 12 inches deep. So that way we don't give up very much floor space, and it'll give me some options for speakers in the future. Yeah, so it's, I mean, I suppose it's a 7.4.4 system. So some people are probably wondering why I'm not doing like 9 channels for the base layer or something, but it's, my opinion is it's just not necessary. I didn't wire for it either, but you know, I suppose I could do it in the future if I really thought so, but I've never found like the wide speakers to be that critical. So what I'm gonna do is just the 3 speakers up front, 4 in the ceiling. There is 4 subwoofers, 2 in the back, 2 in the front, and then the 4 base layer surround speakers. So it's going to be a pretty basic setup in that regard, but all the speakers will be high quality. Acoustic treatments are all going to be, to the extent possible, designed into the room. So I've shown Don some pictures I've kind of looked at and thought could be cool for how we're going to do this. So we'll see. I don't want to show pictures of that yet because I haven't really fully fleshed that out. But anyway, here's the basic equipment as it stands. The processor could change. Same thing, the Trinnov is probably going to go in there at some point in the future since it's a product that I sell. They're just expensive, even for a dealer to buy it. Like my dealer cost is still a lot of money. So I haven't done that yet, but maybe in the future. All the cable came from Monoprice. They hooked us up for that, which was really great, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And we wired the whole house. It's really good cable, I have to say. I ended up having to quickly get some speaker cable for some runs in the back that we had not done quite right. And just seeing the difference between the Monoprice cable that I had, the speaker cable, and this other one that I bought it because I could get it locally quickly. And it was more expensive and much worse quality. All right. All right, guys, I gotta get going. It's late here, and I gotta clean up before the morning. So I'll no. Well, my wife's videotaping me right now, apparently, while I do this. Yeah. No, she didn't. Yeah. So. Was it really? Oh. It's supposed to automatically set it. Honey, come here. My wife won't come here. She's on the other side.